Welcome to Learn English Journey. Daniel Harper lived in a small fishing town on the misty west coast of Ireland, in a narrow house with blue shutters that gently rattled when the wind blew from the sea. For as long as he could remember, his mother, Margaret, had been the heart of that home. She prepared the meals that warmed his childhood, mended his clothes, and ironed the shirts he wore to work. She taught him how to hold a hammer, tie a firm knot, and apologize properly when he broke something important. When Daniel was a boy, Margaret would often say, with the calm certainty only mothers have, "You will always have a roof here." To him, that roof meant safety. At 26, Daniel met Lily in a busy bookstore in Galway. She laughed easily, loved stories, and worked in a small cafe by the harbor, often wearing a coat the color of autumn leaves. Their romance grew slowly and tenderly. Walks along the pier, discussions about favorite poems, and sandwiches shared on rainy afternoons. A few years younger than him, Lily carried a restless energy, dreaming of city lights, theaters, and long road trips. Daniel was captivated by her voice, the way she read aloud, and how she insisted he try new recipes even when he claimed his cooking was good enough. When Lily moved into the house where Daniel lived with his mother, he believed things would go smoothly. He told himself that family mixed like tea and milk, different but better together. At first, Margaret welcomed her politely. She was a woman of habits and strong opinions, with an organized mind and a voice as punctual as the ticking of a clock, never afraid to point out what she thought was wrong. After some initial laughter and polite gestures, the usual tensions of two women sharing the same space began to appear. One evening, after a long day at his small carpentry workshop, Daniel came home smelling of sawdust and rain. He called for Lily, asking for water to wash and then for dinner. Silence echoed through the hallway. In the kitchen, he found Lily standing with her arms crossed, her face tense, avoiding his eyes. In a low voice, she told him that Margaret made her feel small, calling her lazy and criticizing every detail. The day before, she had even asked, "Why did my son marry you?" Lily felt like an intruder in her own home. Daniel's chest tightened. He loved both women, but in very different ways. Margaret had raised, fed, and warmed him through the winters of his childhood. Lily was the vibrant pulse of the present, young, ambitious, intoxicating. Suddenly, the house seemed divided in two by an invisible line. He asked Lily to be patient. Margaret was elderly and wouldn't be there forever. With time, things would settle. But Lily's patience had run out. With cold firmness, she delivered an ultimatum that hurt him more than any insult. He had to choose, either his mother or her. The words burned into his mind. That sleepless night, Daniel replayed every argument, every small humiliation, every sentence that split him in half. How could he choose between the woman who had given him life and the one who filled his days with laughter and hope? When sleep finally came, it was filled with dreams of impossible choices. The next morning, Lily pressed him again. She wanted a decision. She spoke of a new life together, far from that house, in a city apartment, but demanded that Margaret be removed from the picture. Her voice grew sharper each time. She said that Daniel's mother was old, that she had already lived her life, while the two of them still had many happy years ahead. It was a selfish and seductive speech, a shortcut to a beautiful, easy life. Daniel had always considered himself a decent, balanced, and fair man, incapable of hurting those he loved. But faced with such a cruel choice, he felt cowardice creeping in. Slowly, Lily's complaints began to sound reasonable. She painted scenes of quiet mornings with coffee and evenings with friends, free from Margaret's disapproving gaze. She promised freedom, laughter, endless possibilities. Out of shame, fear of conflict, and the intoxicating promise of a new beginning, Daniel began to imagine a future without the weight of the home that kept him grounded. Then, in a moment he would always remember with disgust, a dark thought crossed his mind. If Margaret's life meant so little to Lily, perhaps the problem could be solved. The idea came as a whisper. Take his mother for a walk along the cliffs near the old lighthouse, where the steep slope fell into the foaming sea. One simple act, and everything would be over. He and Lily would be free. At that moment, it seemed like an answer. Later, Daniel would understand it was not courage, but a terrible form of weakness. The next morning, he invited Margaret for a walk, saying the air on the cliffs was refreshing and that she would enjoy the view. She smiled calmly. She loved the sea. Though 72, she still had strength. Jokingly, she said she couldn't walk far. Daniel offered to carry her, and she laughed, agreeing, as she had when he was a child. The path climbed steeply, scattered with loose stones, and the wind pushed hard against them. For a while, they walked in silence, the comfortable silence shared by those who have lived a long time together. Inside Daniel, however, Lily's demand echoed relentlessly. Then Margaret spoke softly, calling him my son, and saying he looked tired, as if she could sense the turmoil within him. She noted that he had been distant lately. Daniel tried to hide his guilt, saying he had many things on his mind. Margaret sighed, and with the patience that had embarrassed him as a boy, told him that people in love often think only of their own comfort and forget the pain they cause. She added that only a mother learns a kind of love that puts her child before herself. One day, she said, when he held a child of his own, he would understand how the heart keeps growing. Her voice carried no reproach, only an ancient sadness and quiet wisdom. With gentle humor, she also warned him to be careful on the path, to hold on to the roots and low branches, because if he pushed her and lost his balance, he could fall too. Don't throw yourself away, she said. Her words struck Daniel like a stone. Somehow she had sensed the darkness in his thoughts, and yet she was still thinking of protecting him. The idea of hurting her after that moment became unbearable, a betrayal not only of his mother, but of the boy she had once raised and comforted. They sat on a flat rock to rest, listening to the gulls and the distant hum of the harbor. Tears came to Daniel suddenly. He thought of Lily's impatient demands, and of the countless nights Margaret had stayed up drying his boots or sewing quiet mends into his clothes. He imagined her aged hands, and how many times they had held things together, not just garments, but people. The realization of her love, a love that knew his needs before he spoke them, weighed heavier than any promise of a perfect life. What moved him most was that, even sensing his cruelty, Margaret still cared for his well-being. Her warning on the cliff had been her final act of protection. The price of the freedom Lily offered had become painfully clear, losing the quiet, relentless devotion that had carried him through life. After that day, Daniel couldn't sleep. He found calm only when sitting at his workbench under the lamplight, carving small wooden toys like those his mother once made when he was a boy. He thought of their home, the creaky stairs, the chipped teapot, Margaret's hymn book on the shelf, and realized what he had almost done, and what kind of man he was becoming to please someone else. His confrontation with Lily was calm, but final. Daniel told her he would not choose between her and his mother, because to choose would betray the part of him that had learned what love truly meant. Lily reacted with disbelief and anger, accusing him of choosing comfort over courage and of hiding behind his mother. She packed her bags and left, slamming the door behind her. Daniel thought about running after her, explaining his confusion and fear, but some explanations always come too late. In the weeks that followed, Daniel and Margaret found a new rhythm. They talked more than they had in years, sharing steaming mugs of tea, old stories, and recent mistakes. He tried to be present in the small things, learning to make her favorite stew, fixing the loose hinge on the front door, and sitting beside her at night while she hummed half-forgotten hymns. The house felt whole again, not because the problems had vanished, but because truth and love had returned to the center of their lives. Daniel never told this story to blame Lily alone. Impatience and pain can come from many places, but he understood that, for a brief and terrible moment, he had allowed selfishness to guide his choices. Margaret's response, her refusal to hate him, her continued care even when she sensed danger, taught him what love can do when it remains strong and pure. Years later, Daniel would still sometimes recognize the scent of Lily's autumn coat in the clothes he had kept, wondering how life might have been different. But the small wooden toys on the mantel, gifts he carved now, filled with memory, reminded him of the life he chose. He stayed. Margaret lived with her son for many more years. They shared quiet mornings, small adventures, and afternoons watching storms pass over the sea. Much later, Daniel married again, in a gentler way, to someone who loved both the ocean and the warmth of a simple home. The lesson of that cliff, that love sometimes reveals itself when we save another from ourselves, became the compass he carried through life. For anyone who ever finds themselves divided between two loyalties, Daniel's story offers a quieter question than, who brings excitement? Instead, who reaches out their hands when you are weak? Choose the one who still worries about your balance when you are about to fall, not out of obligation, but because they cannot help it. That is the kind of love that keeps giving. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more English stories and lessons. Your support means the world to us. See you next time, here on Learn English Journey.